Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of. Well, even though October is now 2 months behind us, I'm going to use this opportunity to wrap up the Halloween-themed books that I selected for this year. And granted, I did have another Halloween book to read and review, but I simply ran out of time, so I'm just going to review and read that one for next year. But as for this weekend, I'm reviewing the gay-themed speculative fiction collection called Devil's Jawbone by BJ Sheppard, which this was recommended to me by my good online friend Blake. And while this book is unfortunately out of print, you should still be able to find a copy pretty easy that's reasonably priced, like on eBay or even thrift books.
Hey.
Carrie, there is no need for you to bother me with any of your little antics. Halloween has been well over a month ago. The ship is sailed and it's time to move on.
If that's the case, then why are you still stuck on Halloween reviews?
Because I was delayed, Carrie.
You know what else is delayed?
What?
This.
What the fuck? As I was saying, I would just like to add that I buddy read this with my good online friends Blake and Hanny, and as always, I'm so very happy that we experienced this book together, as we had a lot of great discussions about each of the story's themes, characters, and unexpected outcomes. So, if any of you are watching, I would just like to thank you for buddy reading this with me. And I would also like to give a special thanks to Blake for his recommendation, as this was the only Halloween-themed book I read this year that I enjoyed from start to finish. Which, to be honest, I should have expected this to be good, because Blake and I have always had a similar vibe when it comes down to our love for that holiday. But without me rambling on any further, let's head off to the quaint mountain town that's nestled away from the rest of society, known as Devil's Jawbone. And while visiting, let's see what horrors lurk about its streets on one of the scariest nights of the year. Devil's Jawbone by BJ Sheppard is a collection of 11 chilling stories that all take place during that special time of year when jack-o'-lanterns are lit and costumed children run about collecting candy. Yet, while the town of Devil's Jawbone might be painted out as a quiet place to live, these 11 stories show that this is a place where nightmares are born. Which, among the stories that are provided, we have a legion of vengeful spirits that unleash their wrath on the living, a bloodthirsty rosebush that seeks revenge, homicidal children, a cannibal dinner party, highway killers, insane doctors, and much more. Devil's Jawbone by BJ Sheppard was independently published in 2015, and it was released on Halloween. Among its stories, it features a new take on two classic urban legends, one of which is the kidney heist, and the other is the hook. With Sheppard's story Long Pig, which regards the kidney heist, the original legend traces back to the early 90s and can easily be seen as a manifestation of anxieties about the medical field. Specifically, it can focus on the fears of organ donor shortages and privileged persons receiving better health care than those not so privileged. Yet, in Sheppard's take of the age old legend, he presents a scenario that doesn't serve medical purposes. Rather, he focuses on wealth classism. In Sheppard's story Hooked on You, which regards the legend of the hook on Lover's Lane, the original legend traces back to the 1950s, and it was speculated that the legend was inspired by the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, which occurred in the 1940s. To show the influence of this legend, it was once reprinted in the advice column of Dear Abby in the 1960s. While this legend takes on many variations regarding scenario as well as symbolism, it is believed this legend was crafted to prevent teenagers from seeking unsupervised places, which in turn could prevent makeout sessions that could possibly lead to premarital sex. With Sheppard's take, we receive a similar scenario, yet the twist is a different approach in regards to who you date. Fun facts! Here's a few things you might not know about BJ Sheppard. BJ Sheppard is an author from South England, and while his work appears to all be out of print, his website served me as a reference for his catalog, where I found that he had published multiple books regarding gay fiction. Among them, Sheppard published gay romance and drama with pieces like The Rainbow Connection, That Day in Spring, Always Have, Always Will, and Between the Lines, as well as a gay Christmas romance called The Perfect Stranger. His works of gay horror include Suburban Legend and Devil's Jawbone. He also published a gay murder mystery novel called Pieces of Jack. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoiler segment, which, if you've not read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, just scroll down to the comments and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top with the timestamp in it. Once you click that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few of my favorite stories. And first up is the gruesome tale Long Pig. Now, this is about a young, attractive, in-shape guy by the name of Tim who one night meets a guy at a bar by the name of Harrison, which, after they spend some time flirting, Harrison lures Tim back to his mansion where he slips Tim a roofie. Shortly thereafter, Tim wakes up in a bathtub where he discovers one of his kidneys has been removed. Then, after he's guided into a dining hall, he sees that Harrison has thrown a dinner party and he is expected to be served as the main course. From here, it's explained that Tim must be conscious while Harrison carves him up because his fear and adrenaline will provide the freshest outcome and best flavor to his meat. So, to ensure they maintain the upper hand, Harrison cuts Tim's spinal cord, and as Tim remains fully aware of everything that's going on, he's slowly consumed by Harrison and his dinner guest. While I had already enjoyed the previous stories, Long Pig was the first time this book took me by surprise. And until that point, I'll admit I had underestimated this author. Which the main reasons why I say this is because when I started Long Pig, it felt like a basic slasher. Then, when we were presented with the kidney heist scenario, my first instinct was to just roll my eyes and be like, really? This is the payoff. And I won't lie, as soon as that reveal came, I was really just thinking about skipping the remainder of the story, moving on to the next, and just calling it a day. However, when I saw that only a few pages were left, I stuck it out, and I'm glad that I did, because I did not expect the outcome to be a dinner party where cannibals were being taught how to prepare an entree. And overall, the main reason why I liked this story was because I admired how the author took an urban legend that was already so well established and he bent it to make it his own. Aside from that, the author's description of Tim being alive while he was slowly being cut and consumed was pretty damned horrific. Like, Not only do you have a pain factor here, which I imagine was excruciating due to how Tim was being opened up and picked apart, but how in the hell does your brain even begin to process what's going on? I mean, at what point do you come to terms with the idea that you're going to die slowly at the hands of a bunch of rich weirdos who not only want to eat you, but they want to ensure your suffering is prolonged so your meat will taste better? Like, that's just fucked in the head. Next up is the story The Ties That Bind Us, which this focuses on a couple named Mason and Blaine who every year around this time go to their mountainside cabin. Upon arriving, Mason explains to Blaine that he doesn't think they can be in a relationship anymore because Blaine had ended up cheating. At this point, the focus shifts to a man named Paul, whose car broke down nearby Mason and Blaine's cabin. And upon him going to them for help, they offer for him to stay the night as none of them have cell service. Then, as the night progresses, the men seduce Paul into a three-way where the story cuts and brings us to the next morning. And this is when it reveals that Blaine and Mason had spent the night mutilating and torturing Paul. Which, upon gaining this twist, it becomes understood that homicide was an activity that drew the couple together early on in their relationship. And now that they have returned to sharing what they enjoyed, it has rekindled the spark of their relationship. So I honestly had no clue where this story was going. And at first, I had my suspicions that the couple was up to something, but I didn't know what. Then, when Paul entered the picture, my suspicion shifted over to him. And as I continued to read, I wondered exactly how the bottom would drop out. Then, when the reveal came, I was happy to see we were dealing with a circumstance where the lovers were insane, and I assume early in their relationship they had bonded over murder, which is really twisted but cool at the same time. And of course, maniacs falling in love isn't a new thing. However, due to the way this story was paced and how the twist came about with a mix of horror and romance, it felt like the author did a good job of making it his own. Also, in a very disturbing way, it seems like the author is suggesting if your relationship is on the rocks and it's lost its spark, return to the basics that brought you together in the first place. Next up is the story Hooked on You. Now, this piece opens up with a scenario that's been done where a couple by the name of Bobby and Sean are parked making out on Lover's Lane when the radio announces that a homicidal maniac with a hook for a hand has escaped the asylum. And while the story plays out like the famous urban legend that has haunted young couples for decades, the concept changes when Sean brings Bobby to his home where he overnights. From here, the focus shifts to a supposed maniac at large named Leadon, who is revealed to actually be a survivor of a man named Dr. Mercer, who had institutionalized him under false pretenses. And as the plot thickens, it's revealed his capture came about because he was dating Dr. Mercer's son, and Dr. Mercer didn't like that. So, for that reason, he cut out Leighton's tongue, removed his hand, and had him branded as a maniac. Once more, the story shifts where Dr. Mercer has come home to find that his son Sean has a new love interest. Out of all of the stories in this book, this one is probably my favorite. And the main reason why is because I feel like with this story, Long Pig, it set me up to want similar stories where the author incorporated an urban legend in his scenario. And I must say, the author met my expectations as I've always been a sucker for this particular urban legend. But what sold it for me was the twist and the backstory that we received on the supposed maniac, as I had never encountered a variation of this story where the maniac at large was actually misunderstood and he was trying to get to the parked car so the people inside could help him. Now, even though the three stories that I just spoke about were among my favorites, there were quite a few other stories in this collection that were really good. So, narrowing this down was really difficult to do. But I'm about to use this next segment to speak about another favorite story. I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about the little asswipe in the story The Lion and the Lamb. Now, let me paint a picture here for you. This story is about a set of twins named Aiden and Alan who have been adopted. And among them, Alan frames Aiden so people think Aiden is a complete psychopath, which this allows Alan to be just as god awful as his little heart desires. So, if the horror movies of yesteryear have taught us anything, when you have a homicidal little shit who's bumping off other people, they cover their tracks where they do not get caught. That is until someone comes along who knows better and is like, hold on here. I used to have a Blockbuster card back in the day. I've seen The Good Son. I know exactly what this little sociopathic nutcase is up to. But no. No. For some reason, none of these dumbasses had a Blockbuster card back in the day, so the little asshole just runs around ruining the lives of every poor little dipshit who decides to give him the time of day. Like, my God, where in the hell is Joan Crawford when you need her? Not only does Devil's Jawbone provide unique stories that take place on Halloween, but it also works as a collection to satisfy fans of gay horror. And while some of its subjects have been done before, the author does a great job of making these stories his own. And he does this by providing new twists on old school urban legends that feels like he reworked them to comment on gay culture. Which, among the stories provided, we have subjects that regard bigotry, classism, toxic relationships, and much more. Not to mention, I felt like there were a couple of stories that provided some pretty cool symbolism. Also, out of the 11 stories in this collection, 6 were outstanding, 4 were good, and 1 just wasn't my cup of tea. So, as you can see, there were definitely more good stories in this than there were bad. Character wise, I feel like the development given to us is what a reader can expect with the typical short story format, as the author gives us just enough to know the character for the small amount of time that a short story allows. And because I was able to become so quickly invested with the characters and plot, I feel like the author did a great job balancing between the two. Now, before I move on to the themes, I feel like there was some symbolism in a few of the stories. For example, in the tale called What Lies Beneath, I felt like the rosebush at the end was a really nice added touch, especially since the mother was a religious extremist. Which I say this because not only do roses symbolize romance and love and all of that good stuff, but from a Christian standpoint, depending on their color, they can also represent Christ, the Virgin Mary, and blood of the martyrs. But since these roses are black in the story, it feels like this is an anti approach to those subjects. Even still, more specifically, black roses have multiple meanings. And considering the context of what happens, it feels like these specific roses represent evil or endings. Aside from that, another story that I noticed had symbolism was The Lion and the Lamb. And while this title normally refers to Christ, under this circumstance, it's to show opposites in a set of brothers, where one is innocent and the other is guilty. Theme wise, this book is packed with quite a few different subjects that are relevant in the world of gay men. And of course, one of those subjects regards bigotry, which, to give a few examples, this topic is seen in stories such as What Lies Beneath, where under this circumstance, an antagonist is introduced who seems like what would happen if the mother of Norman Bates and the mother of Carrie White shared the same body. But in this particular scenario, we're shown a mother figure who would rather her son be dead than gay. And before anyone thinks her mindset is a little too exaggerated to be real, unfortunately, personalities of her type do exist. Aside from that example, a similar concept is presented with the story Hooked on You, where a doctor wrongfully institutionalizes the gay men who are interested in gaining a relationship with his son. Now, it's never determined if the doctor does this because of homophobia or not. However, I tend to think, had his son been straight, we probably wouldn't even have a story. Another subject that I noticed was classism. And to be honest, this is a pretty broad subject that not only covers LGBTQ plus people, but it also covers straight people as well. Even still, although classism within the gay community does exist, it's never really spoken about. And to give an example of this theme, we have the tale called Long Pig, which, similar to other cannibal stories where rich people feast off of those who are less fortunate, something similar happens in this grotesque rendition of the kidney heist as the protagonist is taken to a mansion that he could only dream about owning. But other than there being the idea of the wealthy preying on those who are less fortunate, this tale also comments on beauty standards, which, due to the author's approach, similar to what women experience, we gain insight into the life of a gay, fit man who is obsessed with his appearance and what he puts into his body. Aside from those subjects, I do feel like Long Pig is a cautionary tale that warns you not to go home with a stranger that you meet at a bar. Next up, I noticed where the subject of toxic relationships was an ongoing theme. And although this subject is visited in numerous ways, it has a strong relevance in stories like The Ties That Bind Us, Midnight in Eden, and Highway East 11. Which, among these tales, we have a couple whose relationship regains its spark after they return to the basics of what brought them together. Then we have a concept where a protagonist wants to help what he thinks is a misunderstood spirit, but in the process of trying to help, he loses everything. Also, there's a scenario about an established serial killer who one day is called on to mentor for a fanboy. Now, as you can imagine, none of these scenarios have a happy ending. But among them, Midnight in Eden spoke to me the most, as it shows how you can lose everything trying to help someone who is only out for their own well-being. While those were just a few subjects I noticed, this book is packed with so much more, as each story felt like it was either a cautionary tale or a comment on gay culture. And instead of me creating a video that could easily be an hour in length in regards to everything I noticed, I'm simply going to wrap this up and say that overall, this book did not scare me or creep me out. However, the story called The Long Pig really did gross me out. But more importantly, I had fun with this book, and it was something that I was able to quickly read simply because the author knew how to keep his audience engaged. Devil's Jawbone by BJ Sheppard delivered what I had hoped for Halloween, and I hate that this book is out of print because it really delivered a great deal of fun with its creativity and diversity. Also, I do feel like it really brought on the Halloween vibes. And because of the author's ability to describe, I felt like I was actually experiencing a chilly October night in a small, dreary town with its brooding landscapes and buildings. So, at the end of the day, if you can find a copy of this at a reasonable price on eBay or thrift books, and you're looking for a Halloween themed horror collection that's geared towards gay men, then I highly do recommend Devil's Jawbone. Now that we're at the end of this video, I would like to thank these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account, I have a link available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if there is a certain profession you would like for me to tie to your name, just let me know and I'll do that. Also, I do have a $10 tier available where for $10 a month, I'll still give you the shout out as you see here, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I send out one of my creepy photos. From there, you can print it off and do whatever you like with it. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can continue to have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hit me up on social media, links to my Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and TikTok are all available in the description section of this episode. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I do have more videos coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.